I was born into a modern Orthodox Jewish family in Brooklyn, New York. Ours was a community wrapped in tradition, heritage, and certainty. My father was a synagogue regular. My mother baked challah every Friday, and I was enrolled in a yeshiva by the time I was 5. I grew up knowing the Hebrew alphabet before I could tie my shoelaces. There was love in our home, yes, but also expectation. We were chosen, I was told. We had the truth. Others didn't. And so, my childhood was a mix of spiritual security and social caution. We weren't to mix too much, not to question too deeply, not to look beyond our walls. But I always asked too many questions. I remember one night, I was 11, lying in bed after a Seder dinner, asking my mother, if we're the chosen people, does that mean everyone else is less? She looked at me kindly, but her answer was vague. It's complicated, she said. The older I got, the less satisfied I was with, it's complicated. By college, I was enrolled in a liberal arts program in Massachusetts. It was my first time away from my tightly knit Jewish neighborhood. For the first time, I met people from Palestine. I met Muslims. I met people who had never even heard of kosher rules. And for the first time, I felt free. I took courses in comparative religion, philosophy, and history. I remember being shocked that I had never really studied Islam before. Judaism and Christianity were always on the syllabus, but Islam was treated like an afterthought in our schools, if it was mentioned at all. So I started reading on my own, initially out of curiosity. Then, because I couldn't stop, there were things in Islam that mirrored Judaism. The idea of one God, daily prayers, fasting, modesty, the concept of law and ethics being intertwined. But it was also simpler, not less deep, but more direct. Tawhid, the oneness of God, wasn't philosophical gymnastics. It was clean, clear, powerful. Still, I wasn't convinced. I loved my Jewish identity, my family, my history. My ancestors had survived pogroms, exile, the Holocaust. Being Jewish wasn't just a religion, it was who I was. But something was shifting. The more I read, the more the theological issues in Judaism started to bother me. Why did we need an intermediary for forgiveness? Why so much focus on bloodline and nationhood? Why so little clarity on the afterlife? The concept of the soul in Islam resonated with me in a way I couldn't explain. Then there was Israel. I had always been taught it was ours, that it was our biblical promise. But now I was meeting Palestinians who had lost homes, families, dignity. I wasn't ready to condemn or condone anything, but I began to feel a discomfort I couldn't shake. I started attending interfaith events. At one of them, a Muslim woman shared a verse from the Quran. Indeed, those who have believed, and those who were Jews or Christians or Sabians, those who believed in Allah and the Last Day and did righteousness, will have their reward with their Lord. 2:62. That verse shook me. There was space, not condemnation, not arrogance, but recognition of others who seek truth sincerely. It was the first time I thought, what if the truth isn't what I was born into? What if truth is something I have to find for myself? And that thought terrified me. I didn't tell anyone what I was reading, what I was thinking. I couldn't. My parents would be devastated. My friends would think I was brainwashed. So, I lived in two worlds. By day, I was the proud Jewish girl, still reciting Hebrew blessings before eating, still wearing modest skirts, but at night, I was reading Quran translations under the covers, listening to lectures on Tawhid, watching debates and reflections from converts, some Jewish, some Christian, all seeking what I was too scared to admit I was looking for. Was I betraying my heritage, or was I, for the first time, understanding what God wanted from me? The questions wouldn't stop. They only grew louder, and that's when everything began to change. I kept telling myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just exploring, learning. It was just curiosity, not betrayal. But the deeper I went, the more uncomfortable my comfort became. I would be walking home from class, and suddenly hear the Adantha call to prayer on someone's phone, and I'd stop. Not because it was foreign, but because it felt familiar. I began to anticipate it. Not just the melody, but the meaning. Come to prayer, come to success. The call wasn't just outward, it was inward. Still, I resisted. The logical side of me had so many questions. Did God really send a final prophet? Was the Quran really unaltered? Could I really just walk away from generations of Jewish lineage and ritual? So I started testing everything. I dug into academic sources, read critiques, studied Arabic structure in the Quran, even consulted rabbis and scholars. But what shocked me wasn't the absence of flaws in Islam, it was the presence of harmony. Islam didn't ask me to abandon reasoning, it required it. The Quran itself kept saying, "Do they not reflect? Do they not ponder?" I had never encountered a religious text that so openly challenged its reader to think. The concept of God in Islam was also freeing. He didn't need a chosen race. He didn't need bloodline. He didn't need intermediaries. He was one, transcendent, yet closer to me than my jugular vein. It wasn't about being born into the right group. It was about sincerity, action, belief. One night, unable to sleep, I opened the Quran and landed on a verse that said, "Indeed, it is not the eyes that are blind, but the hearts within the chests that are blind." 22:46. That verse hit me like thunder. All this time, I had been afraid of what people would say, how my family would react, what community I'd lose. But my heart had seen something, and pretending I hadn't felt it was starting to hurt more than the fear of change. I didn't convert right away. It took months of struggle, of praying, awkwardly, tearfully, in whispers, to a God I was still trying to know. I fasted in Ramadan without telling anyone. I memorized surahs quietly. I tried to understand not just what Muslims do, but why they do it. Eventually, I realized I was no longer a visitor in Islam. I was already home. One day, in a small mosque far from where anyone would recognize me, I took my shahada. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah. I said it trembling, not because I wasn't sure, but because I had never felt more certain of anything in my life. I didn't tell my family for a long time. In their eyes, I was still just exploring, but I knew that one day I would tell them, not as someone who abandoned Judaism, but as someone who finally chose God. And when I did tell them, the reaction wasn't pretty. There were tears, accusations, silence. But with time, what softened them wasn't arguments or debates, it was peace. They saw that I hadn't lost myself. I had found myself. Today, I pray 5 times a day. I still remember my Hebrew prayers too, but I no longer recite them out of obligation or fear. I worship out of love, clarity, and certainty. My Jewish roots gave me questions. Islam gave me answers. I didn't leave Judaism out of anger. I left because I found something deeper. And if you had told me years ago that the path of my ancestors would one day lead me to Islam, I would have laughed. But God writes stories more beautiful than we ever could. All we have to do is be brave enough to read them.